'Tis that time of year again when one must ponder which video game was the best of all throughout yonder year. I never write these opening segments, and I'm starting to think that might be a bit of a downfall. Games of the Year.
Number 5!
The PS5 came out, don't know if you know or not, but that means we're officially in the next generation, and we were just bombarded with loads of games. Loads. If you've been lucky enough to be one of the 8 people who got a PS5 when it came out, you were no doubt excited to swing around as Spider-Man, or to die a lot in Demon's Souls. But if you didn't fancy spending money on games for your new PS5 because you had to buy it for $1,000 on eBay, then don't worry, because pre-installed on the PS5 is a tech demo. Astros Playroom. In this platformer, you'll be traversing 4 different worlds, collecting coins and artifacts. To defeat enemies, you'll use your fists, a bow and arrow for a bit, and then use a little gun. It gets really windy at some point, and you'll walk on a variety of surfaces like metal, and plastic and sand, and then at one point in the game it rains. Why aren't you excited? Did I not explain that right? Metal! You can walk on Hang on. It's because of this. Look at it. I got one. Look at it. Had to tackle an old lady for this. All year we've heard about the capabilities of the DualSense controller, how you'll feel tension in the new adaptive triggers when you do things like pull back on a bow, or how it'll feel when you walk in mud. Astro's Playroom gives you a variety of DualSense opportunities, including bow and arrow shooting and mud walking. Look, all I can say is that the feeling of going from this surface to this surface is actually exciting. Using a bow and arrow feels like more than just pressing down the trigger, and my favourite of all, when it rains, the controller rumbles and simulates raindrops throughout the entire controller. The game, which is a good length for a free pack-in, is full of so many of these different situations. And I know this is me saying it's a good game because of work done by an external source, and that doesn't exactly translate to anyone who doesn't have a PS5 and watching this, so I'll quickly say good things about the actual game. It's actually set inside of the PS5, so all the different levels are set inside the console, but don't take apart the console looking for GPU jungle because it won't be there. The levels are well designed and packed full of love and charm. All the little robots are busy, and you'll find several reenacting the greatest hits of the PlayStation library. The music is lovely and catchy, and it does a great job of making the worlds feel even more adorable. I keep having to remind myself that this is a free tech demo and had no business being this good. The collectible artifacts you have to find are all old PlayStation accessories, meaning every time you track one down, there's a chance of some sweet nostalgia. Oh wow, it's the PSP GPS thing. No idea.
Number 4!
Breath of the Wild is still one of the best games I've ever played, but one of the only things I would have liked to see more of is the story and the characters. So when Nintendo announced a new spin-off game in the Breath of the Wild world that would serve as an extension of that world and show what happened 100 years before the events of that game, I knew fun would be had by all. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is not a mainline Zelda title. There's no exploring or dungeons or anything you'd expect from a Zelda game. What there is though, is pure chaos and death. You start off as Link, but very quickly you'll find yourself with a bunch of characters you can use to beat poor monsters to death with. And that's the game. It's the most satisfying feeling ever going into the middle of a giant horde and ruining as many enemies as you can. You can make it as simple or as complex as you like. You can build an unstoppable team with the strongest weapons by doing all of the side missions for all of your characters, or you can just blast through the story. The missions mostly centre around liberating strongholds and fighting progressively harder bosses as the level goes on. The levels are quite big, so you'll have the option to command your team members to go to certain locations and then swap between them anytime you like. This stops any chance of getting bored with using the same character for the whole time, because every fighter is totally different, and they all have their own special skills and moveset. So if you love the world of Zelda and you think annihilating a billion dickheads at once is fun, then I think I found your new favourite game.
Number 3!
The Last of Us Part 2 is not a game we needed. When the original game ended, and it was a bloody good ending, I wasn't left with the sadness that I usually am with other games that I love. I didn't want to immediately jump back in, and I wasn't desperately awaiting a sequel. I could honestly say if Part 2 was never announced, I would have been fine with it, and that is a feeling I've never felt before. And then Part 2 was announced, and I said, yes! Tense, beautiful, and unbelievably brutal, The Last of Us Part 2 shows up 7 years after it rocked us to do it all over again. The level of detail is scary, and I mean scary good, not scary as in scary boo, but it's also scary boo because... As a good sequel should, it takes the mechanics of the original and builds on top of them. In my first ever video, when I talked about Uncharted 4, I said that they'd clearly taken what they'd learned from The Last of Us and parlayed that into Uncharted 4. Well, now it seems like they've taken what they'd learned in Uncharted 4 and moved it into The Last of Us Part 2. Ellie is much more dynamic in what she can do. She sprints faster, can slide between things, she climbs and jumps and dodges, and that's just some of the combat. Stealth-wise, you don't need to rely on crafting shivs anymore because she's got her switchblade, so clickers can eat steel anytime you want them to. She can go prone, which is a gift from the gods because I'm sick of hearing this noise.
Over here!
Exploration is, well, it's a Naughty Dog game. Look at this. It's so hauntingly haunting. There are set pieces that are so much larger in scale than the first and had me clenching my teeth as I was going through them. You're never safe. The game does an amazing job at conveying this by teaching you early on that during certain sections you'll be free to tinker and such without the nasty mushroom men trying to eat your face, and then they rip that away from you, creating a sense of constant dread. If you're one of the few people like me who went in completely blind, the way this game plays out is truly insane. Naughty Dog games are usually about 15 to 20 hours long, so when I got to the 20-hour mark and I thought I'd reached the end of the story, imagine how crazy it felt when it turned out that I was only halfway through. It's so hard for games to do that, and it does this more than once, because it feels like they made the game and then made 2 additional DLCs, but then went, oh, we'll just stick it on the regular game. There was one part where I genuinely thought the credits were about to roll, and then it kept on going for another 4 hours. There's no denying that this game is one of the most controversial of all time, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't love every second of it.
Number 2.
It may have been mentioned a few times by everyone, but this year, so it's only natural that everyone would jump on streaming services like Netflix or to video games. And while Last of Us Part 2 is an amazing game, it didn't exactly do us any favours in forgetting the fact that there's a global pandemic that's killing people, because that's the story of that game. So when A Short Hike dropped onto the Nintendo Switch back in August, even though that type of nonchalant, chilled, no-stakes game isn't usually my thing, something compelled me to get it. And it turned out to be one of the best times I've had all year. The premise is simple. You play as a bird named Claire who travels to Hawk Peak
Provincial
Park to spend time with her aunt. And upon realising she has no phone reception for an important call, not social media like the rest of you cretins would probably need it for, tasks herself with getting to the highest peak of the mountain before the end of the day. The atmosphere immediately hits you over the head with how calm it is, which is an awful metaphor for describing how calm something is. The art style looks like an old Nintendo DS game. It's choppy and blocky looking, but is somehow incredibly charming. And if for some reason you can't get past the graphics because you're a dirty snob, well, have no fear because you can customize it. You can go full chonk mode or take it all the way to a crispy crisp resolution. It's a game that anyone can play, and it quickly shows you that this is literally just a sandbox for you to explore. See something that way? Go check it out. Want to stick to the main path? Do that too. You will, however, find it difficult to get past certain places at first, and for this you'll need to collect golden feathers. With a golden feather you can climb or flap your wings and it'll cost you said feathered token, meaning you have to stop what you're doing and recharge it. So, you collect them all! Look at them all! I could make a bird with that! Through races and treasure hunts, fishing, and a surprisingly frustrating game where you hit a ball with a stick, you'll get golden feathers along with a few other collectibles. And that's it. You can probably beat this game in just under an hour really, and I personally spent just under 10 hours exploring every inch of this game and its island, and I obviously implore you to do the same. It's games like this that show you don't need a whippledy £1 to craft an emotional story that grips your heart and won't let it go until it explodes. I don't know why my analogies are so violent today. Sometimes all you need is a world full of well-written anthropomorphic animals that don't stop talking, a mountain, some smooth chill music, and maybe some new analogies that don't make you sound like a serial killer.
Number 1.
I think I've mentioned this a few times on the channel, but considering I'm almost 30 and I've been playing video games my whole life, I've only very recently gotten into JRPGs. So when the Final Fantasy VII Remake was originally announced, I was excited that it existed, but it didn't hit me the way it would have if I had played the original when I was younger. What I didn't expect is by the time it came out 35 years later, I would have blasted my way through many Final Fantasy games, and now I could not wait to get my hands on this game. And it really could have gone either way, as hyped up games that take years to come out often do. But holy fuck if this game wasn't the most fun I've had in a long time. Just exploring this new version of a world that has been established in the gaming pantheon for decades was incredible. The music is some of the best I've ever heard, perfectly setting the tone for every area you're in. It would have been so easy for them to just do a very similar take on the already beloved music and score easy nostalgia points, but they actually take some pretty surprising risks with some classic themes, and it totally works. The voice acting is brilliant, the character models are real life. Look at these real life living humans. What's this? A documentary? The fact that they were able to take a 4-hour chunk of a 40-hour game and make it almost as long as the original game, I'm so fascinated to see how this entire saga will look when it's ended. The story just gets really fleshed out, and you get some great chances to just sit with these characters, and some really nice moments that slow everything down and let you breathe everything in. The materia system is still there and serves as a great way to customise your characters to how you want them, and even more depth being added with how you level up the new weapons and their stats. But the star of this game is the combat. It's just so cool. When I talked about looking forward to this game in my most anticipated game of the year video, I described the battles as looking like classic anime fights that last for ages with final forms and constant building drama, and that's literally what it is, and that's how it feels. If there was one game that simulates a mental anime fight, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake. Being able to swap from character to character on the fly to pull off devastating combos and stagger the enemy into oblivion as a concerto of doom swells into an epic climactic end is some of the most satisfying stuff you'll ever get to experience in a video game. Every piece of this game was recreated with so much love and respect, and it really shows. It's brilliant, and I love it. And so doth end the top 5 games of 2020. A diabolical year that will go down in infamy as the most... Subscribe.